Hello, mother. Mother, you see inherent consciousness, music. Now, this is an application within hyper and or hyper additional to where and to how the letters of English grammar are grouped, individual and together, bound. No, not only with the other languages, coupled, groups, how grouped and together. This is not just, and when we examine this, it is increasingly so in relative ways. Increasingly, we have ways to discern not only the existence of the hype of relativity, but of that and of how the process in nature itself examines, demonstrates that we are to refer to it as relativity slash hyper relativity, where the identity of the hyper simultaneous has an identity of relationship to itself. It has the value of that as three connected, only increasing volumes, where volume is value as nature slash nature as value. And so, as it is capable of being discerned, where consciousness has been separated from subjects as it is properly to be described, with mind and ground all gather round. Ground is a hyper additional as us, and we are hyper additional as it. And what can't be us or it, but is us both, is a hyper additional with that. And all three of that is semi-nature relationship as all parts and systems of the body are a semi-nature relationship to the person's complete identity. I am not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer. This is since semi-ancient times recorded that and how all identities, no matter who you are, you're speaking about the law. The laws of physics, but they're left out. The laws of these three volume sciences properly and per a method that knew it would have to replace where and how intelligence works opposite, and where and how it works the same as they have intelligence discerned in each modern country, including our own, individually grouped in together. Modern countries and semi-ancient countries from latter to ancient, semi-ancient times, without realizing when they were defending themselves as knaves, K-N-A-V-E, as fact treatment natures, as nature, as sciences and systems, tactical ulterior from the one that is positive to itself. What really causes positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures? What really, in other words, not only is the value of truth that came before the order of any finite detail now, it only increasing, but as an order, which is where and how simultaneously to that order itself is simultaneously increasing. There are distinct identities of order, and the shared order they have bound is that portion of the hyper simultaneous per science, where we can discern it has only increasing volume and value, significance. Same with value with math slash s rather, has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, relatively without simultaneously to identity. This is identity's course, how everything works, and then how a computer works. So, in other words, computers can't work with the order of the finite the way the human mind can. They never will be able to. And so, for example, that is relevant where tactical physical delusions, nature delusions, and identity delusions, relevant to also how they were gotten away with, being and having been self-valued when they were tactically put in place to maintain functional a breaching method against humanity, against the course of difference, which is to show when the sciences are not unabridged as they were with the people behind. Before it was on the books, and then on the books, and since that sustained against Native Americans and for them at the same time, because this system knew that we were going to stay a certain nature, finite, active, progressive to a certain extent, wanting to care and love about the rest of our species better than the rest of the species. Exception natures were propagated into, but this was a breaching method that had already intellectually enslaved modern countries, and separated everyone from valuing syntactically how we are individual, grouped, and together, and how that is tied to all kinds of natures of every subject. And this is relevant where you can see, but it has only increasing volume. One of the ways they got away with this against, right, overtly / insidiously against every difference. One of the reasons we never capitalized, or not just monetarily. How everyone shares the same imposition / s. It's recorded how that was maintained, because there was a complete hyper possession over that certain nature of victim / hyper victim that would only be allowed to take part with where and how. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, per what is known. And insidiousness of people A through Z. Like, for example, regarding the value and significance of where and how the witch trials place is next to where George Washington had to come and counter-extort means to win the last battle of the Revolutionary War in the North. And how so this is relevant to where and how this was lost. It's understanding. Mother, you see inherent consciousness. Music. Yeah. So, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, for example. What is this? The 12th. 148. So it's on. December 12th. December 12th, 2023, 1:49 p.m. live. You have music to say. Music is an application within English. The identity of science, the science is shared, for example, with Earth's special difference. It shows that exceptions in exception nature, that appear to have their distinct identities, not sharing a difference. It comes with the relevance of, or it's a special difference in our own, and that's shared. And with other species, no, even plants, cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall. So there's a quality of fact treatment nature as criminal insidiousness, that a predicate act is value to science as means to discern. But a breaching method, oh, please learn, demonstrably knew and was correct. That people that would have to, as fact treatment nature, counter things like criminal insidiousness at all locations, areas, states, everywhere the species body is, since semi-ancient times, since the latter semi-ancient times, from our perspective. They would do it wrong increasingly, and having increasingly while being presented means to get away with it by self-valuing this having been. And that's directly relevant to where and to how other is pretended legitimately having been communicated for our founders when they asked their communications to entail, how they were forced to speak things and pretend to be, and to be entertaining natures of value treatments, word uses, names uses, that they did not want to, as everyone was fact treatment nature enslaved by a sensory method, a method of sensing relative to database relationships, were also, as all identity grounds, voices were measured and maintained. Defenses, syntactically, of criminal insidiousness natures, of positive treatments, negative treatments, and identity treatments that were leveraged against everyone, including themselves. Now, they were supposed to pretend other. And without realizing how this was maintained, their motivations. So everyone would self-value, all exceptions used to prove things other, and increasingly leaving out finite details. For example, the course of black pupils, whites of eyes abridged. The recorded evidential revelations, which are increasing evidences tied to where and how the significance of this has been, maintained apart from subjects. Knowledge is relevant, inseparable from it. Where and how logic getting away with, and having gotten away with, pretending such is inseparable. This is also recorded. It's relevant where and how. At each age of fact treatment nature, sickly distinctly, other is being and having been communicated for our founders. Because defenses of that was exploited at other locations, including interbranch. This is where no one had no identity grounds voices, has been liberated from, where all kinds of natures of collusions, overtly criminalized, overtly criminally foreign influenced, quote, criminally foreign influenced, unquote, overtly, the history of English and of languages was as other than could and can be afforded, understood by the phenomena of all formal voices of and as the law, and as their natures are actually recorded. And for example, overt criminal enterprises voices, and then where everyone goes home. This is exploiting where and how we are our value/value progression. See whites of eyes, black people's beard. See mandate's course attend the hyperplea. Do not fear. To how to respond. Get the name. Say who disbelieves with me. If you guys, if you don't have badges. If you're a badge, tell me who disbelieves. In other words, that's one of the things they do. They prevent people from knowing others' names while others know them. I just saw a video, a YouTube short on by Reverend Louis Farrakhan. See, everyone leaves out and misses though. Where this breaching method knew that the syntax using short words properly, let alone the protraction of them, and a summary of that. So short words that relative to long words proper and relative to short words proper. We have to understand that and how the databases were taken to collusion. We're only never separated from collusion with a method that had already used all identity ground locations. Conjunction to everyone's fact treatment natures with their finite, grouped, and altogether truth. Positive and negative treatments, which are simultaneously identity treatments, value treatments, all that hyper additional to each other. Tactically other than can be afforded. Explain to people. Because other motivations and things were locked into place. In other words, how we became competition with other countries with economy where there was no economy. Our founders had to begin as an anti-hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, where the formal interbranch was measured and maintained, distinctly from everyone else, but also sickly non-distinctly. Tools reliant and measured upon being reliant upon, finite, grouped, and together. Names uses, identity uses, further simultaneously identity grounds, rules with that, inseparable from that, instead of using it to show how nature uses it, to show us what binds the identities of distinct orders. And this is the science of the hypervolume. The hypervolume's identity of relationship to itself. And the only increasing value of that as three distinct ways, three distinct perfect value progressions. There are three ways that it is functional, where the hyper invisible but still discernible has conjunction to the invisible but still discernible, such as the subject and such as the predicate. So the predicate is valued to English the same way the predicate act is valued to the law. But this is still the identities of law as people A through Z, no matter if you're formally identity of the law or not, as criminal inceasance nature, or they attach you to short, fake words, fake ties to other people, fake natures of ties to other people, or they exploit that having been. And we have to examine the relativity of differentially criminally foreign influence, not wanting to be, but increasingly needing to self-value, everyone having been, and everyone being differentially criminally foreign influence, simultaneously also not wanting to be, but increasingly with finite details, grouped and all together, valuing, having valued that. So also as collusion /S, they don't know the extent of, but they know it is more than they could explain. So everyone, for example, self-values, where and how before things go to interbranch locations and or before they unfold the way they do. Already names, because of, everyone had ties to those locations that were off the records, relevant where and how syntactically. For example, there are proofs that intelligence, per nature's description of it, unabridged. Each age of fact-keeping nature is given an advantage to over the others, that except for where and how Earth's a special difference is there, and it makes it equally intelligent but not equally knowing, with every finite detail grouped in together with their identity that is hyper simultaneous now, distinctly from all the other identities that are simultaneously manifest, including everything together temporary, individually grouped and together. We know that it was made by an identity that makes more of itself as the hyper simultaneous, per science, per the extent we can discern, as an increasing value. And so then it can't become, you need more science words. You need to understand how identity works. So the predicate act is in demonstration of an identity associated with it, called the criminal insidiousness nature. And now this was legalized, people A through Z. And our founders were a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, anti-hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, but still conceived as a overt criminal enterprise by the law, then and now, relevant to where and to how, in our faces, other is communicated for our founders. Then they ask, and with passions and emotions pretended, and with uses of a crime method that people say, oh, have courts decide it, or have police decide it, or have the politics. There are with consciousness, with fact-keeping nature, there are predicate acts, methods, collusion reliant upon, things with this. We'll examine what hurts each group in difference, sickly, distinctly, and helps it sickly. So I have to understand how jobs and narratives by jobs are hyper-additional to this. And we have to understand how identity of ground, identity of relationship to itself. As us with Native Americans, to an extent, we are the same as American citizens. And then further, greater than this, and more finite and relevant ways, how the hyper Native American, before all the changed quality of fact-keeping nature forced, and relevance of it, forced and rose with it, forced to self-evaluate, though, and therefore this naive, is all, in other words, they're forcing Boolean logic where there is a trinity there, where it is functional, how the hyper invisible, but still discernible, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that, positive or negative. It has complete hyperpossession this over each finite, grouped, and together positive, negative treatment, identity treatment, syntactically as we are manifest. But also simultaneously, the breaching method does. And also simultaneously, its singular method of maintaining roles with itself, self-cultivated, was as effective. And it's a syntactical one that came through all that was self-propagated. And while being and having been propagated by it, that hyper sophistication that came with the real sophistication, hyper sophistication, inseparable from each, that has not been allowed to use free speech. And all roles pretend other. So this makes people fight for free speech and defend their logic regarding it. Entertaining and defending roles we know with databases, with NAVE and positive and negative, identity, ground locations, voices, voicings. Incapability of dealing with the finite. Honestly, the value of sequence true as it actually was and is. So where mistakes are value, it's a positive that needs to assume, and only mean per the method of the mind, where those mistakes are being hidden, blamed on other things, others, ourselves. For example, regarding where journalism has been involved through time with forensic locations, and therefore with many, many names and their family members, also through time. So more and more at other locations, kept needing to lie. They kept needing to hide, not lie. Uses of words lie and truth, recorded criminally foreign influence, well, formally, informally, in collusion. We'll examine this. Vaccines, I'll teach you things. So I'm not a doctor. I also have doctors reported attaching little kids and their families to fake conversations with themselves and others to hide roles they had and have with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and pretending it's legitimately with their roles with plainclothes police and with the training of them since they were, this is, each campus has connections to it and uses of it, and of every nature of identity on it since before our founders were born. This has exploitation of where and how the science is appearing to have distinct identities goes with demonstration of Earth's and of our own special difference and demonstration of how the identity of the hyper-simultaneous is that made temporary, that makes more of itself through temporary, individual grouped and together, value/value progressions, progression/S. I taught best vaccines since semi-ancient times. The human course has lost the human means. So this is about music. Thank you.